it's over. The Boston Celtics are not a championship contender. They can't get 40 wins before 20 losses. Hang it up, wave the white flag, do whatever you need to do, sit Jayson Tatum down, because the Boston Celtics lost to the Denver Nuggets. Everyone, and welcome in to the Your Celtics Source podcast, coming to you on Thursday evening after the Boston Celtics finished a successful 3-1 West Coast road trip. Yes, there is the Denver loss on a back-to-back in altitude against Denver, who is missing some of their stars, and Jamal Murray goes down early in the game. Yes, we have to talk about that because there are definitely some pretty obvious issues with this team right now. But as far as the entire season, as far as this road trip, this is far and away a successful road trip. Joe Mazzulla is a top candidate for Coach of the Year. He has guys like Baylor Scheierman, Gonzalez, Jordan Walsh, all performing well above their expectations coming into the season. And Jaylen Brown, he is just put on a season that nobody thought was possible, a season that everybody said, yep, this is a year that they would be down in the tankathon. This is a year that Jaylen Brown would, hold the team steady, but could not carry a team to a top 2 seed in the Eastern Conference, let alone top 4 in the NBA. And I'm sorry to tell you, but for all those haters, Jaylen Brown is the top choice for MVP. With that being said, Jaylen Brown has, I'm not going to say struggled on this road trip. Jaylen Brown has basically shown the league why you're missing a guy like Jayson Tatum, why this team needs a secondary scorer really badly, because Derek White has not been up to the task this season offensively. Peyton Pritchard has been as of late, but the game against the Suns and the Nuggets, were two pretty poor games from Peyton Pritchard. And Jaylen Brown, it's not a knock on Jaylen Brown. Every team in the NBA that is a championship contender has 2 stars, at least 2 stars that are bona fide scorers that can get you a bucket when you need it. And the Celtics are missing that guy right now. And yet, they are where they are. And, Jayson Tatum, we're going to talk about, some of the questions surrounding him in the back half of the show, because we all know, the fit might not be perfect this season, and then there's always the mental side, not only about, will I re-injure it, but what happens if we lose in the playoffs and I'm the reason that we lose, versus I don't come back and they lose, or I don't come back and they go, all the way to the finals, if not win the whole thing. How does that change Jayson Tatum's legacy and all that? Those are always questions that shouldn't be, on the topic of discussion, but they are. That's just how, stars in this league work. How NBA in particular works. How, stars, feel solely responsible for the loss or the win of a team each and every single night. And, we're going to talk about this Denver game. We're going to go into Joe Mazzulla. He's been a great coach all season. I did think that there were a couple of things that he didn't do great in the Denver game that really hurt them. But most importantly, I thought the Denver game was just a game that, yes, the Nuggets are missing Aaron Gordon, and obviously Jamal Murray goes down early with the sickness or whatever he was battling and doesn't return. And Nikola Jokic is one of the best players of all time, obviously the best player in the NBA right now. But with that being said, the Celtics are playing on a back-to-back. You still gotta keep that game close. You still gotta come away with a win like that, because that was a true sort of table setter of where this team lies right now. I know they're the 4th seed. I do think they're the second best team in the Eastern Conference, ahead of the Knicks, ahead of the Cavs. I don't think they're the fourth best team in the NBA. I think the Thunder, Spurs, Nuggets, and Pistons are all above them. I'd put the Celtics at fifth. I think that, the best team right now is definitely the Thunder, although it could be the Pistons. I think I'll say the Thunder because obviously they're not healthy right now. Pistons second, and then you have Nuggets, Spurs, in whichever order you want to put them in. So I have the Celtics as the fifth best team in the NBA. And you're looking at the game against the Nuggets, and, it was an okay first half defensively. In fact, I think it's been a great stretch for the Celtics defensively. You have guys like Baylor Scheierman, who obviously, I talked a little bit about this in my reaction to the Suns game, but was a guy that the Celtics drafted to be a scorer, to be a sort of a baby Steph Curry, probably more like a baby Sam Hauser. Obviously, he could be a backup point guard if you needed. But, his shooting has been up and down. There's been some pretty clunky, bad misses off the side of the backboards from the corners, but then there's been some great moments where he's hit these pick and pop threes, or these just no-dip threes where he's able to shoot it right over his head. So there's been some great positives along with some negatives on the offensive end. The thing that stands out about him is the defense. And I don't know if you give 100% of the credit to Baylor Scheierman, you give 100% of the credit to the Celtics coaching staff, probably a combination of the two. But the way Baylor Scheierman has been able to change his game and find a role in a pretty, structured formula from Joe Mazzulla. If you don't play excellent defense and you don't play hard, you're not going to play. The offense, that's going to keep him off the floor sometimes. But if he's able to play at this level defensively, not only is he going to get the time and the experience to improve his offense and get shots, because he's going to be getting reps, he's going to have the ball in his hands because he's on the court, but he can also be just a great guy that you can throw on a Jamal Murray, a great guy that you can, throw on maybe a little bit of a bigger point guard, Luka Doncic. He was great against him in the Lakers game. And obviously, Baylor Scheierman's not the only guy like that. You have Jordan Walsh, who I actually think Baylor Scheierman is a little bit better than offensively. That's why we haven't seen much of Jordan Walsh in the last few games. Ugo Gonzalez. I think Ugo Gonzalez is the best guy that you have right now in terms of that group of 4 to 5 players. I'd probably put Ron Harper Jr. in there as well. For these 5 defensive first, or at least they've become defensive first guys in the case of Baylor Scheierman and maybe Ron Harper Jr. as well. But these guys that can go out there, lock down the best player on the opposing team, and then give you these short bursts of offense that Joe Mazzulla can cycle through whoever has it going at the moment. So the defense, the Celtics have been the best defensive team in terms of points per 100 possessions since the trade deadline. And to be honest, I don't think Nikola Vucevic has been a big part of that because, quite frankly, Nikola Vucevic hasn't been great defensively. He's not known for being great defensively. Queta's been the real reason for their success at the big man position. And we'll talk about Queta in just a second because Queta is having, if not a top 10, definitely a top 15 best center performance this season. Maybe even higher. I'm not sure where Queta would fit in. I haven't looked around and looked at all the great centers that this league has, obviously. But Queta has just come out of nowhere thanks to coaching development, his own personal drive to be a positive impact, and just the repetition. But we'll get to Queta in just a second. Back to this group of guys that you have. We're seeing it show up offensively for sure. This team, they have turned the corner defensively. They have, always been a top defense this season just because that's how the Celtics roll. Joe Mazzulla doesn't play guys that are not good defensively. But ever since this trade, they have been the best defense in the NBA. Last 3 games, they've held all their opponents under 100 points. And yes, they failed to score 100 points in a lot of these games as well. They might have failed to score 100 points in all the games except I think they failed to score all 100 points in all the games except the Warriors game. But they're holding teams under 90 points sometimes, under 80 points in one of the games as well. This team is elite defensively. Top 3 defense in the NBA, I think, when the Pistons and the Thunder are all healthy. I think they're ahead of the Spurs as a collective, despite Wemby being the best defender in the NBA. But the offense. I mentioned it a little bit earlier, but Jaylen Brown, he needs a guy, a right-hand man, a partner in crime. And, that is where Jayson Tatum can fit in. But we also need a guy like Peyton Pritchard to show up more consistently. We need a guy like Derek White to figure it out, and he, is trending towards not figuring out. Because in the Nuggets game, he scores 18 first half points, was the only one that had it going, hit his first 5 threes or something like that in a row. He was just cooking. And he had to, because nobody else besides Jaylen Brown was showing up. Right? The offense has been so horrific in the last couple of games, despite the defense. And we're like, thank God, on a second night of a back-to-back in altitude against the best player in the world, it seems like the Celtics are able to hold and stay right with them. But then in that second half, the Celtics just fall apart because Derek White only gets 2 points. Jaylen Brown, disappears. Peyton Pritchard, was ice cold the entire game, let alone the second half, right? He wasn't even an option in that game. And obviously, it's ups and downs for those, 4 or 5 defensive first guys that I've mentioned, right? So you don't expect any of that from, him. And Queta, obviously, he's not a offensive engine in any way. He is a great around the basket and cleans up misses. One of the biggest things I actually thought got away from the Celtics was the offensive rebounding, right? They've been winning some of these games in blowout fashion over this stretch, not because of elite offense. We know that. They haven't been able to get anything to go in a half-court offensive setting. But they've been able to get, or at least out-rebound an opposing team by 10 to 15 rebounds per night, and that has allowed them just to get more shots. And it doesn't matter your efficiency, but if you're just getting so many more shots than the opposing team, only a couple of those need to go in, and you're winning the game. And if, some of those go in more than half, then you are, you're looking at a team that is blowing out another team, like in that Lakers game, like in that Suns game down the stretch, right? So those were 2 great offensive games in terms of just manufacturing points by getting offensive rebounding, hustling, effort. And that's something that I'm not sure is going to be a factor, or at least as big of a factor in the playoffs. Because you look at this, you look at how the NBA playoffs work, and every team hustles. Every team, has defensive guys out there, especially in the Eastern Conference. If you go up against the Pistons, right? They're a great defensive team. And they hustle and effort and physicality. They all bring that to the floor each and every night. In the playoffs, you're not going to be able to take advantage of that sort of maybe advantage you have on other teams. And so the way you're going to need to score is going to be with just generating good half-court offensive efficiency. And the Celtics haven't been able to do that over the last month, and that has concerned me because Jaylen Brown, has taken a little bit of a step back efficiency-wise, not because he's, playing bad. I guess you could say he's playing, worse than maybe he was in January, but because he has just, he's had to be the only guy. He's had to carry the load each and every single night because nobody else is showing up consistently for him, right? And that's where I would love to see Jayson Tatum. Jayson Tatum is not going to be 100% if he comes back, but we don't need him to be. We need him to be 85%. And to be honest, I actually, I know Jayson Tatum, his best attribute is probably not his, pull-up three-point shooting. It's probably getting to the rim, creating mismatches. But I actually think that if you could just get a 36% 37% three-point shooting from Jayson Tatum. I would love him in order to not affect what this team is doing right now because they have been on a roll. But you want that offensive production from him. If he can just be a guy that plays that Baylor Scheierman role where, you just hit some corner threes. You don't have to, and, it's hard to say whether Jayson Tatum would be able to do this, just given, I'm not saying he's a bad guy, but just egos of NBA players in general. Who knows if he can play off the ball that often. And he doesn't have to do it for entire stretches of the game, but just get a couple of threes from him and then play solid defense. And he doesn't have to be guarding centers right away. He can be guarding the 4, the 3, whatever it may be. But just get some offense that you just haven't had over the last, few games, if not last month. And that could make or break the Celtics' success this season in the playoffs. I actually do think they're going to finish as a top 2 seed. I do believe the Cavs are going to finish as that 3rd seed and the Knicks down to 4 just because the Cavs have the easiest schedule remaining. But you're looking, you're going to probably play, assuming the standings stay with the Celtics in the second, you're going to play, a Eastern Conference play-in team. I don't have concerns about that. Unless Charlotte, shows up and Charlotte is shooting lights out and they're finding a way to play okay defense. But you get a Jayson Tatum that can just, fix the offensive struggles that they're going through right now. The stagnant, very ISO-heavy basketball. And I know Jayson Tatum plays ISO-heavy basketball, but he can score the ball off of that. He can shoot threes. You're not going to get the inconsistency. Some days you score 15, some days you score 0 from guys like Baylor Scheierman, Ugo Gonzalez, Jordan Walsh. So I would just love Jayson Tatum to just come in and play that, 15 points per night kind of guy. Just be that spark plug, whether it's off the bench or starting. And I don't think he'll come off the bench at least, not more than 2 games, just because, he is the best player on this team, historically, right? So is he going to come off the bench? Probably not. But if he can just play 20 minutes a night and just give you 15 points, something like that, just take a little bit of the load off of Jaylen Brown, this team is going to be just okay in the playoffs this season. That being said, with the Jayson Tatum situation, I know he's making a documentary. I know that he maybe, there's questions about whether he's coming back or not. And I know, Felger and Maz on 98.5 The Sports Hub, they have been pretty adamant that, this sort of controversy around him is stupid and, it's bad for Jayson Tatum, it's bad for the Celtics. They've hated how the Celtics have, used their financial resources this season. I think it's way overblown. I think Jayson Tatum, he might be holding out just for the documentary's sake, but I think it's all with the acceptance from the Boston Celtics. There's no way the Celtics would not be allowing Jayson Tatum to run it like that if they weren't okay with that. And I actually don't think, maybe deep in their minds they don't want Jayson Tatum to return because they think that, it's better for his long-term health. But I think based on where their financial status is anyway, they're already under the luxury tax at this point. I wouldn't be so afraid of Jayson Tatum coming back if I was the Celtics. I would put him in, see where this team runs. And we talked a little bit about it earlier, but, maybe Jayson Tatum is afraid to be the reason that they mess up this season. But you have to get over that. I mean, you've lost before. You rolled your ankle once, and were basically the reason you lost to that Miami Heat after coming back from down 3-0. I'm not going to say you weren't definitely the reason they lost last year. I actually put largely the reason that you lost last year was on the health of Neemias Queta, or not Neemias Queta, of Drew Holiday and Kristaps Porzingis. That was the reason that you lost last season, right? Because they were already down or going to be down 3-1 when Jayson Tatum went down. But, I don't know what the date is Jayson Tatum will be coming back. I don't think it's going to be this weekend, March 1st. I do think it's going to be, probably 2 weeks out, sometime March 10th. Maybe that game against the... I know he doesn't want to go on the road. That is maybe one thing that I don't like about this whole situation. The team might need you against like the Cavs or someone. You might need to come back and play that game because it could determine your playoff spot. But other than that, I'm okay with how the Celtics are handling this. Obviously, people have gotten, really agitated over Joe Mazzulla's death stare on Bobby Manning in that interview where he refused to answer whether Jayson Tatum practiced or not. But when did you ever expect the Celtics to tell you that? They're not going to tell you that because keeping it secret helps to eliminate game plan from other teams, helps to eliminate pressure from other guys, eliminate pressure from Jayson Tatum himself, just the league in total, right? It takes the attention off of the Celtics and more towards what's going on the court, which is better for the team overall. So, there's no way the Celtics are going to tell you when he's coming back. Just one day he will be going from out to questionable or maybe out to doubtful or whatever it is. They'll take him off the injury report and we'll know then that he is going to play. And we'll do a live reaction whenever that happens. So, yeah, stay tuned for that. But, yeah, the Jayson Tatum situation, is getting way overblown. He'll come back when he comes back. He's coming back this season. I don't see any way. Yes, there is the one way in which he doesn't come back. But, I think that is pretty, out there at this point that he's coming back. So we'll wait for him. And I do think that could play a big part in fixing the offensive struggles that they're going through, which was the biggest question, or I guess the biggest problem in the Denver Nuggets game. Because the defense was outstanding as it has been throughout the road trip and the last month or so. Ever since the trade deadline, as I had mentioned. The last guy I do want to talk about, as we wrap up this episode, is Neemias Queta. And, Neemias Queta, he obviously came in as the only center that you had on this team. Yes, you had Luka Garza, but we all expected Neemias Queta was going to be the main guy, as Luka Garza had rarely played real NBA minutes up to that date. And, what he has done this season is just outstanding. He's averaging a double-double in the last many games, if not a double-double, close to, in rebounds and points. And when the points are just coming from him just being in the great place at the right time, setting screens and then able to roll out or ghost them quicker than anyone had ever anticipated. Right, that was one of the big problems, is he was holding that screen too long and then he wasn't able to get to the basket. But now he's able to slip them extremely quickly, able to get lobs from Derek White, lobs from Jaylen Brown, Peyton Pritchard, whoever it may be setting that screen with him. And Neemias Queta has taken just a team that, was going to be the demise of this season. Obviously Jaylen Brown played a big part in that. But, if you didn't have a playable center, this team could be sitting in a lottery position like the Indiana Pacers for different reasons, right? But Neemias Queta has been spectacular this season. Just one of the best off-on net differentials, right? Just the rebounding, the physicality. And I know Jokic had his way, as he has on everyone, but Neemias Queta, was fantastic against Alfred Şengün a couple of weeks ago against the Rockets. He was great against Luka Doncic, guarding him, against LeBron James. Holding his own, moving his feet on the perimeter. He's not getting exposed as much as he did last season. And I do think that all just comes with playing more, getting his feet underneath. And yes, he does look gassed often. He'll play, a full first quarter, or he'll play, an 8-minute stretch and he'll be really tired. But what he's able to do is rest and then come back out and do the same thing. And you've been able to play him 25, 30 minutes a night. I never thought you could play a center that much of his caliber coming into the season. Or I guess the caliber that he was coming into the season. Obviously, he's not that guy anymore. Joe Mazzulla often early in the season, the center rotation wasn't good. They were getting out rebounded. They were really struggling defensively. They were, Neemias Queta would, be sitting on the bench, and the Celtics would be going small ball often. with like a guy like Ugo Gonzalez playing the 5, right? But Joe Mazzulla has gone away from that, those total small ball lineups, because he knows not only the impact that a center makes, but the impact that Neemias Queta specifically is making on each and every night. Behind Jaylen Brown, Neemias Queta is the sole reason that the Celtics are where they are, sitting at 39-20. They get that win against, or 38-20, I guess. They get that win against the Nets, and then I do believe the Hornets maybe or 76ers on March 1st, the game that was supposedly Jayson Tatum's return gate. We'll see. But then you're sitting at a season that, yes, they already got their 20th loss, but you're still sitting at 40-20, twice as many wins as losses. It's just incredible what this team is doing. And, ever since Simon left, the defense, best in the league. The offense, yeah, there's fewer creators on the floor. Peyton Pritchard has an off night, and you really don't get any center or any secondary scoring, any bench production, which was, probably the biggest reason for their loss to the Denver Nuggets. But other than that, you have an elite defense. You have, a offense that could be getting better with the Jayson Tatum. And this team is poised to make a championship run, not just this season, but in previous seasons. Obviously, you're going to have to make some other moves, around the margins, maybe a guard or two, maybe not, hoping Derek White can fix his struggles, which it looked better in that Nuggets game until that second half where he just didn't try and shoot. He just, the Nuggets did a great job of taking him out of the offense. It wasn't like he went cold or anything. He just didn't even attempt to be a shot. He wasn't aggressive. And that's a separate situation than him making shots or not. But I'm not worried so much about the offense. And obviously, this defense is excellent. This team can make a run, as I had just said, not this season, or not just this season, but next season, next couple of years in Jayson Tatum and Jaylen Brown's prime. And, they're going to have to figure out the Jayson Tatum and Jaylen Brown situation this season. Who gets to be, obviously it's Jaylen Brown's season this much, but how much of a split? How do you get them involved? Who gets to play that off-ball role? And, who is going to do a better job of that? That all waits to be seen. But I am extremely happy about where this team sits right now, heading into the last month of games here. Yes, tough loss against Denver. Yes, a game that shows, some of your flaws. But other than that, this is a team that you can't have any negative things to talk about. But we'll wrap it up here. Thank you guys so much for watching. You can check out this podcast and all podcast episodes, not only on YouTube, but in Spotify, Apple, Amazon, wherever you listen to your podcast. Please give a like and a rating on those platforms. It's really appreciated as I continue to do instant reactions after almost every games. I haven't been able to do some of the ones this week just because of how late the games have been. But, we've done some reactions the day after, and we'll get back into the flow of games on Friday. We'll have a instant reaction after that. Maybe we'll go live for some of them, so stay tuned on YouTube. Check out the notifications on whether we'll go live or we'll just have a video afterwards. Obviously, we'll have another podcast episode after the third Celtics game. I know they play the Nets on Friday. They then play, if I'm not mistaken, the Sixers on Monday. They play after that, or maybe Sunday they play the 76ers. After that, they play Milwaukee, so we'll have a reaction on, Thursday. So similar to like this one, probably a week out, we'll have another reaction or another podcast episode. So stay tuned for that. And until next time, go Celtics.